So with the base, you just need to remove the masking tape that holds on the 4 pieces that go in here. You don't need those, but you might want to use them later in the build to hold against any brickwork or framework or anything, so don't chuck those away. And then you need to get hold of some track. In this particular case, I'm using Code 55 track. I've got a yard of flexi track, and I've cut it into 2 pieces, and I've made them longer than the base. Now obviously this needs to be longer because obviously it's a through road. Even if you decide to close this end or one end with the depot doors, it's still a through road at the end of the day. So what you need to do is obviously put those on top and just try and equal them out at each end, and most probably you'll have 4 or 5 sleepers at the end. Now try and arrange it so you can cut off at least the amount of sleepers as possible, and you'll see here that this goes over the framework, so we need to be cutting away these 2 sleepers here, and then in the middle we've got 3 sleepers that protrude over the base, so we need to get rid of those 3 sleepers, and then at the end we've got again 2 sleepers. So I'm going to be cutting those off with a Dremel, and then I'll come back and show you. Then hopefully that track will then fit inside your base. What I've actually done for this demo is use Code 55 track and Code 80 because I wanted to see to make sure that when the overlay model board has been put in place that you still have enough ridge for both rails, which we do. Now they're just held on by some Tamiya masking tape underneath at the moment, but obviously these need to be glued to your base. But ideally we want to prime and paint these prior to fitting to the base. It just makes life a lot easier for you. So I'm going to prime these, just a light coat of grey, that's all you need, and then you can use your concrete paint or however you want to do it to give it that effect. There are some engraved lines within the model board to effectively look like concrete panels that would have been laid at the time. So I'm going to go into the garage and give those a coat of primer, but I've just used Code 55 and Code 80 just to make sure that they both work. What we also need to do on the base is where we've removed the sleepers, the base needs to be painted, because when we come to put our overlay, and obviously then we'll have our center strips, if I can grab one, if you don't paint it you'll still see the MDF base underneath, so having it black will certainly disguise it quite a lot. So I would suggest painting the end pieces, the 2 middle pieces, and the other end piece in a black or brown, whatever color you want, just to make it look a lot nicer. I've also noticed that obviously the Code 80 and Code 55, the Code 55 has a much thinner thickness of sleeper compared to the Code 80. Now the Code 80 slots in there nicely and hits the base on the edges, through the middle and the outside. Now the Code 55 rests on this part, and this part, so there is a gap between the base of your base and the sleeper. Now what I'll most probably do, because this is a pre-production model, is I'm most probably going to engrave a thick line there which will take out some of the MDF to allow this to drop down. It's not the end of the world if you don't, but I will try this. You can always join it up, and then obviously you need to put a piece of cork underneath or ballast or whatever you want to do. It can be resolved quite easily, but I will be doing an engraved line, the thickness of the rail, so hopefully it will drop down slightly and look exactly the same as the Code 80. Now if you use Code 80 and you haven't got a problem, it just slots in there nicely, but I just thought I'd point that one out now, but hopefully by the time this goes to production that won't be an issue. When we're doing the base and we've done the black bits in each of the corners in the middle, we also have to remember that we need to coat the inner and outer edges of the rails, because obviously they're going to be seen with the center strip. So I've used some MIG track primer, given it a couple of coats, and that's given the inner rail a dull sort of like brown colour, and it's certainly made it a lot better. So when you come to put your concrete strips on the middle, you won't see any shiny rails, because you certainly wouldn't see that in a depot. So just remember to do that before you glue your base overlay into position, because once you've glued that in, you won't be able to do it, or you would be able to, but you'll most probably make a mess on all of your concrete. So best to do it before. And obviously all I've done is just, there you go. So hopefully you can see that the camera's not gone out of focus. Just giving it a coat of big primer 2 times on the inner and outer rail, on both rails, and that looks much better. The base overlay primer has now dried nicely, and the next thing I'm going to be doing to this is to create the concrete effect. So I'm most probably going to find a sheet of MDF that I can put these on. I'll use my Tamiya masking tape to hold them down so they don't go anywhere, and I'm going to use the sponging method and just use a number of different greys, whites, to make my concrete, and I'll come back and show you when I've done mine, but you can do yours however you want. So I'm going to be doing that next, and I'll come back and show you when it's done. I finished painting the base overlay. I've done a number of colours to give it a concrete effect, quite happy with that, and then also on the engraved line horizontally down the overlay, I've masked up and done a yellow edge just to give it some variety. Just thought it might look quite nice, because I'm building this as it's a new depot. It won't have any weathering at all, so I've added some yellow, and all I'm going to do now is add all these pieces to the base. So I'll add a light layer of superphatic glue from Deluxe Materials, push it down, make sure it all notches into the holes. And what you can do is, if you still got your template from where you did your depot doors, you can put that in the holes and make sure that they match up. So, and then obviously I'll hold it down and pressurize it to keep it in position while it dries, and then I'll do the middle and the outside, and then we'll do the inner center rails as well, which you'll need to glue to your sleepers. So we'll have a go at doing that, and I'll come back and show you when that's completed. So we now have our base overlay all in place and lined up. What I normally tend to do is obviously then just turn it over, and I just add some normal masking tape on the back to go over the rails. It's not going to go anywhere, because obviously you've got the joints, but I just put this on just to be on the safe side. And then obviously when I come to finish it all, I normally give the base a coat of black acrylic paint, just cheap stuff from the works or Range or wherever, in a tube, but I normally put a strip of masking tape along over the lines. And just like that, that's how I mean. So 2 strips, covers over the track, goes up against the MDF as well, and keeps everything in place should anything untoward happen. And I'll give that a coat of black paint later on in the build.